Hey everyone, what's up? Today we're going to be talking about the top 30 wide receivers I have ranked for the 2025 fantasy football season. I get these numbers by taking a consensus of all the projections for all players going into the season and comparing them with each other. Sometimes we'll see that some wide receiver numbers for a team don't add up to what the quarterback should be doing. Obviously they should, because in order for a wide receiver to get stats, quarterback also has to get those stats. So I average the two together, compare them to what Vegas says for sports betting, as well as what they got last year for projections, to make sure they're along the lines of what they should be doing as far as performance this year. So after I went through and did all the numbers, this is what they're showing us for what the top 30 wide receivers should be doing. If you want to check out my other videos, I also broke down the top running backs, quarterbacks, and tight ends for the season. But let's dive into the top 30 wide receivers. Starting things off at number 30, we have George Pickens. George Pickens moved from the Steelers to the Dallas Cowboys this offseason, had 11.8 fantasy points per game in the 14 games he played last year. He's projected to get 12.5 this year. His targets, receptions, and receiving yards should all go up because he's playing more games this year, and has Dak Prescott as a quarterback. Dak Prescott's a very good quarterback coming back. He's projected, I believe it's 4,400 or 4,500 passing yards this year. 19% of that target share for his pass attempts should be going to George Pickens. And he's going to get 1,000 receiving yards off that with 6 receiving touchdowns. They should be in the end zone a lot. I expect their offense to improve from last year because Dak is back. They already have CeeDee Lamb. And they're going to be a very pass-first offense, especially because their running back, Javonte Williams, is a pass-catching running back. So that's George Pickens. And moving on to number 29, we have Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers played every single game last year for the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson's his quarterback. Arguably should have won MVP last year as a quarterback. And Zay Flowers looks to do the exact same thing he did last year. Same target share, same receptions, targets, and receiving yards, possibly 2 more receiving touchdowns with a improved and more mature offense. They were playing for the first time together last year as they were assembled. They do have Deontay Johnson this year, not really a wide receiver threat to Zay Flowers, but now they're all put together with Derrick Henry. They understand how to play and win. So I can see the receiving touchdowns going up a little bit more, as Lamar is also projected to get more passing yards this year. Moving on to Chris Godwin, who only played 7 games last year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Was wide receiver 1 when he was healthy as far as a fantasy points per game. Wide receiver 2, I believe, on the depth chart. In the games he played, he was demanding 30% target share, getting 19.7 fantasy points per game. I traded for Chris Godwin right before his injury last year, so I was really bummed about that and hope he has a bounce back year this year coming back from injury. Because of the limited games he played last year, obviously all of his stats are going to go up, assuming he plays all 17 games this year. He had 5 touchdowns last year in the 7 games he played. He's only projected 6 this year, so if he does see an improvement there, assuming he's back fully healthy and able to perform like he was last year, I don't see him getting the same target share. I see that dropping down to 20% from the 30% he got last year. And there's the addition of Emeka Egbuka, a rookie wide receiver who looks promising in the slot, but really at all positions could take some target share away. And Bucky Irving, as he gets more playing time, does demand some receptions as well in target share. And then obviously they have Mike Evans, who's the star of the team at the wide receiver position. So he does have a competition in the wide receiver room, but still getting 20% target share and 13 fantasy points per game is very solid. Moving on to Jakobi Meyers for the Las Vegas Raiders. Technically wide receiver 2 on the team if you consider Brock Bowers to be a wide receiver. Wide receiver 1 on the official depth chart though. Geno Smith is now an upgrade at quarterback. He had 14.4 fantasy points per game last year, 13.1 is his projection this year. Same targets, same receptions, same yardage and 2 more receiving touchdowns is reasonable, with them being in the red zone more this year with the addition of Ashton Ginty and improvement with Geno Smith at quarterback. Moving on to Jerry Jeudy of the Cleveland Browns, played every single game last year. His points might have been a little inflated with, I believe it was Joe Flacco at quarterback. If Joe Flacco is the quarterback this year for them, then Jerry Jeudy's numbers will be high again, as he had a lot of targets last year. He had almost 30%. He was at 29% target share in the games he played last year. Probably going to drop down to 25.7 because Njoku is going to be healthier. Njoku does take a little bit of the targets this year. Who knows how Cedric Tillman's going to do for competition? I know he had some good games last year, but then started to fall off. And same amount of receiving touchdowns, overall same stats. I think Jerry Jeudy could have a good year this year. Moving on to the next 5, we have Courtland Sutton, DK Metcalf, Marvin Harrison, JSN, and Calvin Ridley. Starting with Courtland Sutton, he played every single game last year for the Denver Broncos, averaging 13.9 fantasy points. This year he's going to average 13.4 for pretty much the same production as last year. The Denver Broncos, according to PFF, I mentioned this in my running back video, Denver Broncos have the best offensive line in the NFL. PFF is a rating system that combines a lot of stats and data to figure out who the best person and who the best positions are, or who the best O-line is, defense, all that. So if they truly have the best offensive line, it leaves Bo Nix, who's the quarterback, lots of time to throw, get good quality looks. Courtland Sutton's good at both creating space and making ridiculous catches. So it's not out of the normal for him to get same production as he did last year, now that they have the best offensive line. And now adding Evan Ingram at the tight end position is going to open up more things for Sutton to get good production. Moving on to DK Metcalf for the Steelers. He was a Seahawk last year, now he's a Steeler. And he has Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Aaron Rodgers loves throwing the ball to his wide receiver 1, who will be DK Metcalf this year. Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. 12.9 was his average last year, 13.5 is his average this year. Slightly increased targets and receptions than he had last year. Russell Wilson was his quarterback last year. Not that he's a heavy rusher, but he probably rushes the ball more than Aaron Rodgers will. And with that means more passing from Aaron Rodgers, more passing for his wide receiver 1 will be the reason we see a 200-yard increase in his receiving yards and possibly 2 more receiving touchdowns. Moving on to Marvin Harrison. I wouldn't consider it a bounce back year, but I think Marvin Harrison should start to grow into what we thought he was going to be, at least being a top 23 floor wide receiver going into this year. He only had 11.6 average last year. He played every single game. Hopefully that grows to just below 14 points per game or more. Can see an increase in target share this year, most likely. Kyler Murray's his quarterback, great quarterback, mostly passed to Trey McBride last year. And if Marvin Harrison takes just a few more of that target share, moving his receptions from 62 to 72, and then therefore increasing his receiving from 885 to 1048 receiving yards, and then his touchdowns from 8 to 10. Being in the red zone more often does lead to more touchdowns. James Conner's in the offense, Trey McBride's in the offense. We obviously have Marvin Harrison. And they have a good enough offense for Marvin Harrison to produce these numbers, and I think he can hit these targets for this year. Jackson Smith-Njigba, or JSN for short, is the Seattle Seahawks wide receiver 1, played every single game last year, averaging 14.8 points. That might drop down to 14 or 13.9. And he does have a quarterback switch from Geno Smith, who I mentioned moved to the Raiders, to Sam Darnold, who comes over from the Vikings. Sam Darnold did lead the Vikings to 14 wins last year. He was also throwing to Justin Jefferson, who we know is the best wide receiver in the league, or at least always in contention for the best wide receiver in the league. I don't know if JSN is going to be able to produce the same way Jefferson was last year with Sam Darnold. And so these numbers are fairly reasonable. I think Darnold is a close equivalent to Geno Smith's ability if he's ever able to throw the ball out of the pocket and doesn't get stuck in there. So 6 touchdowns is the same as last year. His receiving yards might drop a little bit. He did have a 31% target share last year. I can see that dropping to 20% this next year. So moving on to probably a shock to some people just because of the people he's projected to go above. Calvin Ridley is currently going in, I believe it's the 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th round, depending on which platform you use and how large your leagues are. Calvin Ridley played all 17 games last year and only averaged 12 points per game. He did have 120 targets and 64 receptions with, for majority of the games, if not all of them, Will Levis is quarterback. In those games, he only had 4 touchdowns. As we've been seeing in both the preseason and training camp, Calvin Ridley is making strong quarterback-wide receiver connection with his new number 1 overall pick quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, Cam Ward. If he continues this, he could see an increase from 25 to 28 and even 29% target share, granting him 136 targets and 72 receptions for 1,100 yards and hopefully 7 touchdowns. I don't know if the Tennessee offense is going to improve any more than they did last year, but what I do know is they're going to be playing from behind, meaning that they're going to want to be throwing the ball a lot more to catch up in points. If Cam Ward likes Calvin Ridley as much as we're seeing, I can see his points going up to only 14, but you can get an only 14 point per game wide receiver in the 7th or 8th round. I'm taking him every chance I get. Because the next person on the list is going even earlier than him, and that's Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson plays for the New York Jets, averaged 14.8 points over his 17 games played last year, getting 7 touchdowns, 1,100 yards, and 101 receptions. Looks to do the exact same this year if you look at the stats. Another 100 receptions, 6 touchdowns, 1,000 yards. We do have Justin Fields as a quarterback. Justin Fields is a capable quarterback to get the ball at least to his wide receiver 1, who Garrett Wilson is. He does like to run the ball, which, I mean, working with the offense, I think Justin Fields is a great fit for the New York Jets. Breece Hall's a great running back. Between the two of them, they're going to open up the field as far as pressure goes, so they can't probably guard Garrett Wilson as much as they could last year with Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback. So could open up some opportunities. At the very least, he'll have the same production as he had last year, granting him a top 20 quarterback or top 20 wide receiver rank. Ladd McConkey is going to be our next wide receiver. He had 14.9 fantasy points per game last year. Probably going to get 14.1 this year. Los Angeles Chargers did bring back Keenan Allen, funny enough, in the offseason. And I say that's funny because, side note, when the Chargers made the trade with the Bears for the pick that they used to get Ladd McConkey, they traded away Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen spent a year at the Bears, and the Bears then waived and didn't re-sign Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen came back to the Chargers, so the Chargers traded basically Ladd McConkey traded away Keenan Allen for Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen. So anyways, that was just a little side note. They have Keenan Allen back on the roster. They drafted Trey Harris and Marion Hampton. Marion Hampton isn't a pass-catching threat as much as Najee Harris is, who they they signed in the offseason. So a little bit of a different offense. Shouldn't be a whole lot different in fantasy production this year. I expect him to do great this year, getting pretty much the same stats. But there are players I would take over him still. Some of those being in later rounds, like Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith is going to be the next wide receiver that we're talking about today at 18. And he played 13 games last year. I mentioned in some of my other videos, and I'll mention with A.J. Brown later in this video, the injuries that the Eagles suffered. With the Eagles' injuries that they suffered, there was less passing. Less passing meant more points for Saquon Barkley. And because there was less passing, we didn't see Jalen Hurts do what we know Jalen Hurts can do when he has to pass the ball. So when everybody's healthy this year, which I expect them to be, we can probably see an improvement at the wide receiver positions across the board, even tight end positions for the Eagles. Devontae Smith won the Super Bowl last year with the Eagles, averaging 15.3 points per game in the 13 games he did play. Getting a 28% target share with a quarterback who should be passing the ball more this year now that everybody's healthy. He should command 14.5 fantasy points per game on his 85 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 10 receiving touchdowns, as they are one of the best, if not the best, offense in the league this year. Xavier Worthy is next on the list at 17, playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. His points per game projection could increase as we get more news on the Rashee Rice possible suspension. Depending on how many games it is, we'll move Xavier Worthy up or down with his projections. Rashee Rice, if he gets suspended, Xavier Worthy should be the number one wide receiver for the team, in which case he's going to get more targets. He had 26% target share last year. He's right now projected at 17%. So you do the math, he should get 50% more of these stats for those games that Rashee Rice is out, meaning he could see 18 points per game possibly. Right now he's projected at 14.6 on 70 receptions, shy of 900 yards and 9 receiving touchdowns. With his rushing upside, that is not mentioned on this list, but it is accounted for in his ranking, with his rushing touchdown upside of 4 being a possibility, with 135 rushing yards on 29 attempts. We have seen even in the first game that that Xavier Worthy played, he has the ability to rush the ball, as he got both a rushing and receiving touchdown in his first game he played last year. He also balled out in the Super Bowl, albeit it was garbage time, and he had a couple deep ones thrown to him. But Xavier Worthy could shoot up in this list if Rashee Rice misses significant time at the beginning of the season. Next player is a lot older than Xavier Worthy. Mike Evans is in his 30s, plays for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's a great quarterback, and Baker Mayfield throwing him the ball. We already talked about Chris Godwin. Mike Evans is the number one wide receiver for the team. Had 17.2 points per game in the 14 games he played last year. Most likely going to average 15 this year, slightly less due to him getting the same stats as he had last year over more games. So he's projected to do his same production last year with the addition of 3 more games, moving his average from 17 down to 15. And I think he can do that. He is an aging wide receiver, so it makes sense that his production would go down, but 15 points per game still allots him a almost top 15 wide receiver this year. Speaking of top 15 wide receivers, we're moving on to DJ Moore. DJ Moore is the Chicago Bears wide receiver 1, played every single game last year, averaging 14 points per game, looking to increase that to 15.2. Ben Johnson is now the offensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears. Ben Johnson came from the Lions. The Lions did super good last year with Ben Johnson as the OC. And now the Chicago Bears have him, and they also improved their offensive line, meaning Caleb Williams might finally have enough time in the pocket to throw the ball and get that ball to DJ Moore, who's his number one target. So DJ Moore looks to improve from his 98 receptions, 100 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns to relatively the same stats at 100, 1051, and 8 receiving touchdowns. But if the offense improves, I also expect DJ Moore to improve, and that makes him a top 15 wide receiver. T. Higgins was hit or miss last year, and I say hit or miss, meaning he was either on the bench or due to injury and you knew before the game, or you started him and you saw the 18.6 fantasy points he got last year in every single game he played. So he played 12 games last year, missed 5 of them, He's projected 15.4 points per game this year. Honestly reasonable. It's not normal for a wide receiver 2 to get 18 points per game. Unless you are playing for the Cincinnati Bengals like T. Higgins is, and you have Jamar Chase pulling away multiple people on coverage, and you have Joe Burrow, who's projected to throw the most passing yards of any quarterback this year. So very possible for T. Higgins to get more than 15.4 fantasy points per game. But if he doesn't, this is still a wide receiver 2 who's able to put up wide receiver 1 numbers with 90 receptions, 1,100 receiving yards, and 10 receiving touchdowns. Moving on to, I feel like we're going back and forth with these old and young wide receivers. Tyreek Hill is an old but still fast wide receiver who was missing Tua last year. Tyreek played in every single game last year, getting 13 points per game, looking to improve to 15.6 with his better quarterback back. Tua's a great quarterback who loves chucking the ball downfield to Tyreek Hill, who's able to outrun all his defenders. So we can see his targets increase, even though his target share is going to drop, because his quarterback's going to get more passing attempts off, and they're going to be distributed more to Jalen Waddle, possibly Darren Waller, because he's now on the team coming out of retirement, and Achane's actually getting some wide receiver work as well. So target share drop, but pass attempts increasing, meaning more targets, more receptions, more receiving yards, more receiving touchdowns. Tyreek Hill is going to be our wide receiver 13 this year. Terry McLaurin played in every single game last year. Some saw him as a touchdown merchant, meaning he got all of his points off touchdowns. He did have 13 last year, which is kind of a lot for a wide receiver like Terry McLaurin with a rookie quarterback at the time. Now Jaden Daniels, the Washington Commanders quarterback, is moving into his second year. Still passing to Terry McLaurin is the wide receiver 1, assuming Terry McLaurin doesn't hold out, meaning Terry McLaurin is currently looking for a better contract or extension because he did do so well last year. And so if he continues to hold out, we might see some of those targets going to Deebo Samuel, who's currently getting practice with Jaden Daniels as Terry McLaurin holds out. Terry McLaurin should get the same stats as he did last year, maybe one less receiving touchdown, but don't expect his fantasy points per game to change at all. So moving on to Drake London. Moving on to Drake London. I gotta drink more water. All right, moving on to Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons. Just shy of the top 10 wide receiver spots. Played in every single game last year, averaging 16.5 fantasy points. We saw how well he could do with Michael Penix at the end of the year, as opposed to how he was doing with Kirk Cousins. Did great with Kirk Cousins. Loved Kirk Cousins when he was on the Vikings. But Penix is showing a lot more favorability to Drake London. And at his current projection of 28% target share compared to the 30% he had last year, and 151 targets that he could possibly get at just the 28% target share, I have a lot of faith that he can blow this 15.8 points per game out of the water, break into that top 10, maybe even top 5 for wide receivers. Right now he's only projected at the 15.8, and we'll see how other players around him project moving into the start of the season. But right now, I think he's going to be the most targeted guy on a offense that is not only pass heavy, but also could improve from last year with them having Bijan, and Penix is able to throw the ball and run a little bit and all that. So I can see Drake London moving above this as we approach the season a little bit more. But right now, he's going to be our wide receiver 11. Moving on to the top 10. We have A.J. Brown at 10, Devontae at 9, Nico Collins at 8, Justin Jefferson at 7, and Brian Thomas Jr. at 6. Starting with A.J. Brown at 10, Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver 1, played 13 games last year, averaging 16.7. It'd be nice if I could show you these stats, because if you move his 13 games and project it out to what 17 games would have done for him last year, they're the exact same stats that we're looking at for this next year. A.J. Brown's a very consistent wide receiver who's going to repeat what he did last year. I already mentioned how the quarterback passing play is going to change with Jalen Hurts when I talked about Devontae Smith. And so I'm not going to get into that, even though it's already just rambling. A.J. Brown should continue to do what he did last year and is going to be our wide receiver 10 this year. Next is going to be Davante Adams. He's on a new team this year. I'm going to mention this again when I talk about Puka. Davante Adams, quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams now, is Matthew Stafford. He is experiencing some, it's either back or shoulder injuries right now. And if Matthew Stafford is either limited or not the quarterback for the Rams for even just a few of the games, or any of the games, all the games, whatever it may be, Davante's projection is going to drop significantly. Matthew Stafford is a phenomenal quarterback in real life and able to pass the ball and get these projections to Davante no problem. If they don't have Matthew Stafford starting as quarterback, I'm not saying Davante Adams isn't draftable, but he should not be taken in the 4th round that he's being taken in now. If Matthew Stafford plays and he's healthy and he has no limitations, Davante Adams is a steal in the 4th round right now, depending on what league size you're in. Right now he's going roughly in the 4th round. That's a steal, being a top 9 wide receiver. Looking to get 10 receiving touchdowns and 1,300 yards with 97 receptions, assuming Stafford's playing. If Stafford doesn't play, these numbers will be updated, and I'll send those out to you guys. Nico Collins played in 12 games last year, averaging 17.6 points per game. If he plays in every single game this year, these are his stats at 91 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 11 receiving touchdowns. He had 7 receiving touchdowns last year with 1,000 yards and 68 receptions. So not unreasonable for those to project up to a full 17-game stretch of the numbers shown next to his name. 17 points per game puts him at that wide receiver 8. I'm fairly comfortable putting him there. I don't think I would take him above any of these next guys on the list. And assuming he can play a full healthy season, because he does have some injuries from time to time or some lingering pain that he sits through. So we'll have to monitor that as we move into the season and consider drafting him. But assuming he plays every single game, you can expect 17 points per game from him. Justin Jefferson. Love this guy. Huge fan of the guy. No, I'm just kidding. So he had 18.6 fantasy points per game last year. Projected 17.1 this year. He had a great season last year. Hawkinson was out for almost half of it. And he was getting all the targets. He had 31% target share. Jordan Addison even missed a little bit of the beginning of the season with injury as well, and is going to miss the first 3 games due to suspension this season. He does have J.J. McCarthy. I believe J.J. McCarthy won't live up to his extreme hype, but I do believe he will live up to where he was drafted and will be a better quarterback than Sam Darnold was, at least in his first year. Who knows how he'll do in future years, but we're talking about this year, and I think Justin Jefferson will be his number 1 target this year, as he is the best player and receiver on the team. And dropping down from 10 receiving touchdowns to 7, and from 1,500 receiving yards to 1,400, and about the same receptions, is fairly reasonable for the best wide receiver in the league. And it's hard to not want to put him in the top 5, but you do have to be a little skeptical with J.J. McCarthy being a little bit newer as a quarterback, and J.J. still monitoring it's either hamstring or quad injury before the season even starts. So all those things keep me from putting him in the top 5. And again, I am only ranking these off of the stats and just throwing in commentary to defend these numbers. But JJ is going to be our number 7 wide receiver, which leads us to BTJ, or Brian Thomas Jr. at 6. Brian Thomas played in every single game last year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. The only difference in playing in all those games was his quarterback throughout the season. He had Trevor Lawrence for a little bit, and I think it was Mac Jones for the other little bit. He had 34% target share and only had 16.5 points per game on that. Mac Jones liked to run the ball a little bit more than Trevor Lawrence. People say Trevor Lawrence didn't really pass BTJ the ball that much when he was there, which makes sense why he would only get 27% target share this year for a projection. At the same time, Mac Jones liked to run the ball, and Trevor Lawrence likes to pass the ball. If Trevor Lawrence passes the ball more than Mac Jones, there's going to be more targets to go around. So even at a lower target share, like I mentioned earlier, you can get more targets and therefore more receptions, more points, more touchdowns, all that. So BTJ is going to be our wide receiver 6 this year. And that means we get to go to the top 5. So the top 5 wide receivers in order are going to be Ja'Marr Chase at 1, CeeDee Lamb at 2, Amon-Ra St. Brown at 3, Malik Nabers at 4, and Puka Nacua at 5. Starting things off with Puka Nacua, I already talked about it briefly with Davante Adams. And I say briefly, I actually talked about it a lot. So the whole Stafford thing, these numbers are going to be if Stafford plays. If Stafford doesn't play, Puka's going to move down. And hopefully JJ can move up to the top 5. So Puka had 18.8 fantasy points per game last year on 11 games played. It's going to drop down to 17.8 this year because Davante's playing. Davante's on the team. He's going to take away target share. That's why Puka's target share is going to drop from 37 to 27. But all his targets, receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns are obviously going to increase if he plays more than the 11 games he played last year. So all that goes to say same exact performance as last year, slightly less production because Davante is there. At the same time, you can argue Davante being there means less pressure for Puka, so they can help each other out, kind of like T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase help each other out in that regard. So Puka still being a almost 18 fantasy points per game player with a healthy Stafford deserves him a top 5 wide receiver spot. Malik Nabers was probably the best rookie you could pick up last year at the wide receiver position, as he is a 18.1 fantasy point per game player last year at 15 games played and looks to do the exact same thing this year. Looking across all stats from last year to this year, same stats, slightly lower target share, which is reasonable because 36% is a lot for anybody, and more receiving touchdowns. I do think the offense is going to improve regardless of who his quarterback is going to be. Most likely it's Russell Wilson starting the year. Who knows if it'll be Jackson Dart later or Jameson Winston if they're down or they do a rotation. But Malik Nabers had, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 quarterbacks last year, and put up 18 points per game on 170 targets and had 109 receptions. It's ridiculous what he was able to do with how much quarterback change he had throughout the year. So getting a consistent good quarterback like Wilson, or even a pass crazy quarterback like Winston, I can see an improvement there. If not, he'll repeat what he did last year and he'll be a top 4 wide receiver. Moving into the top 4, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, or top 3. We're already at top 3. Moving into the top 3, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, 17 points per game. 18.4 points per game on 17 games played. There's a lot of numbers. 153 targets is his projection this year from his 141 he had last year. Going to probably see an increase in target share. I talk about this in my other videos regarding Lions players and target share. I think that with the departure of Ben Johnson, who was the offensive coordinator last year, who set up the scheme for all their offensive success, I think that they're going to lean a little bit more on their best players, Amon-Ra St. Brown being one of them, and increase the target share even just by a little bit, meaning his fantasy points per game would go up and his opportunities and big play scenarios would also increase. So we're going to see a little bit more receptions, a little bit more receiving yards, maybe a little bit less touchdowns as those get filtered through other players, as he's going to get a little bit more pressure this year. But same production as last year and slightly more points per game. Moving to CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb played in 15 games last year, averaging 17.5 fantasy points per game. All his numbers should increase with Dak Prescott being healthy this year. CeeDee Lamb, I forgot how many years ago, maybe it was 2022, 21, maybe it was 23. Top wide receiver with Dak in all those years that Dak was healthy. And so at the same target share, they do have George Pickens, but if anything, that's going to help CeeDee Lamb out. And 27% target share, same as last year, all that stuff. More receptions, more targets, more receiving yards, and more touchdowns. Dak's going to get them in the end zone more often. CeeDee's going to score more. CeeDee's going to be our wide receiver 2 this year. And when I draft CeeDee Lamb, I tend to draft Dak Prescott for the stack because Dak goes really late in rounds. It works out really well if you're not able to get Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase, if you've watched my other videos, you can see his points per game compared to everybody, and you're probably thinking, oh, is Ja'Marr Chase going to go number 1 overall? Yes, should be going number 1 overall this year, regardless of what league format you're in. Even in in 0 PPR, you should maybe go Bijan or Jahmyr Gibbs. But this is PPR, and so Ja'Marr Chase is going to go number 1 overall. 23.7 points per game last year. Beats out majority of quarterbacks and every single non-quarterback last year. The only players that maybe scored more points than Ja'Marr Chase last year were definitely Lamar Jackson, but maybe Josh Allen, and I don't even think he outscored his quarterback. Yeah, Joe Burrow didn't even outscore him. So Ja'Marr Chase went for almost 24 points per game last year with every single game being played. And they lowered his touchdowns by 4, his receiving yards by almost 200, and his receptions by 10. And he's still projected almost 21 fantasy points per game. The offense didn't change. The defense is still going to allow the team to score, so they're still going to be playing from behind. They're still going to be throwing the ball a bunch. And so if nothing changed, there's no reason Ja'Marr Chase cannot be the number 1 wide receiver and number 1 fantasy player again this next year. So, quick recap. I'm not going to say every player's name because there's a lot of players, but this is the top 5. Chase at 1, Lamb 2, St. Brown 3, Neighbors 4, Puka 5. Maybe I can say all of them. BTJ 6, JJ 7, Nico 8, Adams 9, Brown 10, London 11, Terry 12, Tyreek 13, T 14, DJ 15, Evan 16, Worthy, Devontae, Ladd, Wilson, Calvin at 21, JSN, Marvin, DK, Sutton, and then 26 to 30, Judy, Jacoby, Godwin, Flowers, and Pickens. So those are my top 30 wide receivers. Thank you all for watching. As the preseason progresses and these rankings change, I'll send out more videos. I'll also be doing videos ranking which players you should be taking based on their round value, meaning you saw this list of all these players. If these 2 guys are going next to each other as far as a rank goes, but they're going right here for draft position, you should maybe take this guy, even though he's lower on the rank, than this guy in the higher round to get the best value out of your draft. I'll be making those videos and sending them out in the next few days. So thank you all for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you next time.